folks. It's Real Talk Mormonism, episode number 20. Live calls and conversations on StreamYard. This is your chance to talk to me. I am D-Vase, your humble host. That is talent on loan from Kolob. I'm coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. This is your chance to discuss anything and everything that's Mormonism related, whether you're into church history, theology, doctrine, practice, whatever. This is your platform. This is your show. We welcome both critics and defenders of the faith. This is your time to shine on screen. Whether you don't know the first thing about the church or you're a member of the church's Strengthening Church Members Committee, this is your chance to make it happen. You can also Stump the Chump. If you want to stick it to me, this is your chance. Nothing is off limits. The only thing that we are bound by is the terms of service from YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. This is being simultaneously streamed to all of these platforms. Stump the Chump, no holds barred, outsmart the know-it-all, no rules, except for we have to talk about something that's Mormon related. Simply click on the StreamYard link that is in the comment section and you can join me live on this show. Now, since I don't have anyone in the queue, that's okay. I have a great deal of stuff that I want to cover. Nevertheless, I release a huge amount of content onto the Mormon News Roundup channel. No one comes close. And let's start with some of my shorts that I release. I release 2 shorts every single day. Let's watch some of these shorts and I'm going to give you my humble reaction to them.
Most Americans don't know why so many Mormons live in Utah, or why their cities often look different from others in the United States. It turns out that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church, has a long history of moving from place to place, often facing violence as they tried to spread their beliefs. The Mormon Church was actually founded in upstate New York by a man named Joseph Smith. Smith claimed he had a revelation from God, saying that all the existing Christian churches weren't worshiping the true God. He was instructed to create the Book of Mormon, which he said was translated from golden plates he found buried in his yard.
Not in his yard, but nearby.
A small group of family and friends were fascinated by this new message, and soon the church had around 45 members. However, Joseph's hometown was small, and the town council quickly learned about this new religious group. They told him he would need to disband the church or move elsewhere.
Is that true? Is that actually... I'm not familiar with this claim. The town council of Palmyra told Joseph Smith that he needed to leave. That seems unbelievable to me. That's the first time that I've ever heard that. And I do know a little bit about church history, but that seems astounding to me.
So, Joseph and his followers packed their bags and, under divine direction, moved to Kirtland, Ohio. While waiting for further instruction from God on where the Zion, or Holy Land, should be,
Zion. This isn't the Matrix. It's pronounced Zion, which, by the way, you can see Zion's reality check. That's my moniker.
The Mormon community in Kirtland grew rapidly, reaching a few thousand members. But as their influence grew, local opposition intensified. One night, a mob violently dragged Joseph from his home, covering him in tar and feathers. Accusations of bank fraud forced Joseph and his followers to leave Ohio. Fortunately, one of his followers had scouted a potential site for Zion in Jackson County, Missouri. Joseph claimed he received a sign from God that this land was near the original Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve had once lived.
How convenient.
But the Missourians, who had been there long before, didn't welcome the Mormons and resisted the newcomers. Violence against the Mormons erupted in Missouri, and Joseph Smith, urging his followers not to fight back, eventually led them to Illinois.
Well, they did definitely fight back. There was the Battle of Crooked River. This short is incredibly disingenuous, but I get it. It's a 3-minute clip. Howie, welcome to the program. Odd time for a live stream. Hey, I've got today off. This is the only time that I've got. So I try to do a Real Talk Mormonism show once a week if I can.
In Illinois, a young lawmaker named Abraham Lincoln even lent a hand to the Mormons.
What is it? When did this happen? When did Abraham Lincoln possibly have a Mormon connection here? This is unbelievable. Where are they getting this from? I am astounded from this short.
The story only becomes more intense from here, with Joseph eventually finding himself in prison in Illinois.
Finding himself in prison? Well, I mean, it wasn't just that he woke up and found himself in prison. He was put in there for insurrection and his role in the Missouri War and for treason. This is a really myopic take here. I do not like this short. It brought up 2 things that I am not at all familiar with. Number one, the Palmyra Town Council expelled the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or at that time, which would have been the Church of Jesus Christ, from Palmyra. It was founded in 1830, August 6th. This is the first time I've ever heard that. Number 2, there's a connection of Abraham Lincoln and Mormonism. I'm not at all familiar with this connection. Now, could I be wrong about that? Sure. but I highly doubt it. Next up. Hey everybody, it's Steve Hayes with the Mormon News Roundup. In 2012, Randy Bott, a BYU professor, made headlines for his deeply racist comments about black people in the priesthood. Bott argued that black individuals couldn't hold the LDS priesthood or even enter the temple prior to 1978 because, in his words, it would be like giving a young child the keys to a car. Bott also claimed that God was protecting black people by withholding the priesthood, suggesting they couldn't handle the responsibility. While his views were undoubtedly racist, Randy Bott had the audacity to vocalize what many in the Mormon church still believed privately. His comments became the public face of Mormon racism, leading to his firing from BYU. However, instead of facing any real accountability, Bott quietly retired and was sent on a mission to Hawaii, while the church publicly distanced itself from his controversial remark. Bott became the church's scapegoat for a problem the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints refused to truly confront. Yeah, Bott was first of all, I have a full-length episode that's coming out about the disgraced BYU professor Randy Bott. It's almost an hour long, and it's going to be released in the next, couple of months. Like I said, I've got a lot of content that's ready to go, but I can only put out so much every single day. Nobody's going to watch it. So, number one, what did Randy Bott say that was incorrect? According to Mormon teachings at the time, everything that he said was possibly correct. That's the nature of Mormon racist teachings, is that he was following, he taught in the CES system, that's the high school seminaries, institutes, for his entire life. He was a former mission president, and he was teaching at BYU. Do you think he was going rogue on this and teaching something that was not in accordance with LDS theology and doctrine? Hardly. He knew his theology and doctrine just as well as anyone. But the problem is that he said the quiet part out loud. We're supposed to pretend that the racism in the church is all according to divine plan, but we're not supposed to talk about it. It wasn't until a couple years after Randy Bott made those controversial statements in which the church finally came out in its gospel topics essays and denounced some of the more reprehensible racist teachings that the church has espoused for many generations, including the idea that people are cursed by God with black skin, or that the curse of Cain, a couple of those other theories about how black persons were supposedly in a pre-earth life, not valiant or fence sitters in a supposed war between God and Jesus in the premortal life. The church finally distanced itself from those particular teachings, maybe thanks in part to Randy Bott. I'm not really sure. Now, as far as accountability is concerned, whenever a Mormon leader says something, does something, or engages in something that's inappropriate, or racist, sexist, whatever it is, what happened to him? Did he lose his pension? Heavens, no, he didn't lose his pension. In fact, he was sent to Hawaii on a mission. For a lot of people, that would be considered a vacation. And I have it on good authority that his particular responsibilities in Hawaii were quite limited. So yes, far from Randy Bott having some kind of a negative repercussion for saying all of this crazy racism out loud, he was actually promoted. I do have a full-length episode that's coming out about this, and this was brought out in 2012 because a reporter, this was at the time of Mitt Romney's presidential run, the famous Latter-day Saint, Mormon Mitt Romney. Well, a reporter was wandering around BYU, knocking on doors, asking religion professors to make a comment. And Randy Bott, instead of following church procedures, decided, hey, I can talk to anyone. And he found out the hard way that if you're an abject racist and espoused white supremacy, that people don't take too kindly to that. And that caused a great deal of problems. His professor of religious education, the dean there at BYU, Professor Bell, said that he was going to deal with Randy Bott privately. What an entire debacle. And the problem is that the racist scriptures, of course, that Randy Bott was relying on, those have never been denounced. So it was an entire debacle from beginning to the end. And as Ruth, welcome to the program, he felt comfortable saying out loud teachings of leaders. Of course he did. He was towing the party line. He didn't say one thing that wasn't incorrect at the time. Now, technically, now that the church has reversed course on some of the nasty aspects of his racist past, his teachings would not be in alignment with current modern doctrine and theology, but they were in total alignment at that particular time. And he just happened to be the poster child and was thrown under the bus by Mormon Incorporated, which is what they will do to you if you step out of line. Okay, next short. Let's continue this. Let's continue this train. I'm probably going to go through a lot of them. The next one talks about the church surveys. Has research replaced revelation in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Let's find out. It's been over 100 years since the Mormon Church has canonized a revelation. Let that sink in for a second. No new scripture, no fresh guidance straight from God. Instead, we're getting church surveys issued by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Research Department. Think about it. Divine revelations are now replaced with corporate data collection. So what does that say about the role of heaven in the LDS faith?
Well, it seems like God's got some serious competition, probably too busy with more important stuff to bother with the church's direction these days. If the heavens aren't sending down revelations anymore, are we just left with just more market research, focus groups, and hundreds of billions of dollars?
That's a very good question here. Now, what I released this short, and almost no one figured out in this particular short that this short is an AI version of myself. I cloned my voice, I cloned my face, and I even cloned the chair that I'm sitting in right now. This is 100% AI. That's not me. Okay, that's just a clone of myself that I made. And almost no one detected the particular, I don't know if you want to call it the sleight of hand here, that that's not me. That's not my voice. It's all made up. It's funny how you can be deceived because, of course, you're putting it out on this channel so nobody knew. Now, to get to the actual point here of the particular short, it says, has research replaced revelation in Mormonism? And people are bringing up the fact that the last canonized, I brought this up, the last real revelation in the church was the last section of the Doctrine and Covenants, which was, I believe, released in 1918. Now, technically, the Declaration number 2 has been canonized since that time, which is the church's reversal on the race and the priesthood ban. But the last real revelation is in the Doctrine and Covenants, because Declaration number 2, it doesn't even purport to be a revelation. It doesn't even pretend that it is. Okay. And somebody put in the comment section, the more stuff that they canonize, the more stuff they have to walk back later. It's smart at that level. They have dropped the pretense. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you don't canonize anything, then you don't require, I mean, technically canonization in the church is supposed to have common consent. But the church always runs roughshod over that. And this person here, Matthew, says, well, every 6 months we add scripture because of General Conference. No, sir. Every 6 months you do not add any scripture. No, that does not happen. The General Conference talks are not canonized, and that's a big problem that I have. If they were scripture, then the church would treat them as such. They're not scripture, therefore they should. Then what's the point of them? And the other point also is the fact that somebody brought up in the comment section. They said, "Well, Declaration number 2 has been canonized. It doesn't matter if something's canonized or not. That really doesn't have any effect on the truthfulness of something. I can write on a piece on a napkin something, canonize it, and that doesn't make it true." Okay, so this is the whole point here. We have all of these research surveys that are being sent out from church headquarters repeatedly to people, and it seems like that is replacing the purported revelation that the church was once led on. Joseph Smith never sent out a survey. Nephi in the Book of Mormon didn't survey people. In the Bible, Jesus didn't send out surveys. They supposedly communed with the divine and then brought forth further light knowledge that was supposed to bless all of our lives. That doesn't seem to happen in the modern church today. Instead, it's led by a research department. I also have a full-length episode coming out of me taking one of the official church surveys here, coming out in short order. Welcome to the program. If you want to join, you just follow the link below. Now, next up here, this is a repost here that I put out. It says, calling all ex-Mormons, I need help. Let's see what this woman over here needs help on. She's in some rough shape here. This is Rachel Trias Life. If you want to go follow her on TikTok, she posted this and she said, why won't the Mormon church let me go? This is a repost here. Let's see what is causing her so much problems.
I just came in from getting the mail and I need a little help because I just got this in the mail. Ex-Mormons, you know what this is? The friend with Joseph Smith. The gospel is restored on the front. We left.
I love that start. The gospel's been restored.
We left 3 years ago. Like, we resigned. We pulled our names off of the roll and everything. And this is still coming to me, as well as the Deseret book.
Now, just by way of clarification, I still receive the alumni magazine, which I do occasionally read, and I also read the education magazine that I get from the church as well. I am content on usually throwing those away, although I sometimes thumb through the BYU magazine because, I worked full or part-time for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for 24 years. But the church's official magazines, that would be very, very different in my opinion.
Magazine, just super randomly. I always just throw them in the recycle bin, but I would like them to not be sent to me at all. Also, you know how the TBMs like to come to your comment section and they're like, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone.
I like that snark. I'm going to come in here. I want to watch that one more time.
How like the TBMs like to come to your comment section. They're like, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone.
Let me see. You can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. See, my accents are not very good.
They're not leaving me alone. I would like to be left alone.
That is the perfect level of snark here. And a couple of comments here that I want to highlight from the comment section here. A family member hasn't attended for 4.5 decades. They still bug her. Yeah, that's the irony here of I actually have a full-length episode coming out on the whole concept of you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. So I'm going to have to save that for a little bit later. But the concept, which was kind of cemented by Neil A. Maxwell, but it was also taught by earlier church leaders, is somehow if you still talk about the church, that you somehow still know that the church is true, which is absolutely ridiculous. The vast majority of ex-Mormons don't give a second thought to the church whatsoever. You know, I have someone that I baptized on my mission that I live close by to him right now. And he left the church shortly after I baptized him and hasn't given it a second thought. That is the typical experience of most ex-Mormons being converted, quote unquote, converted to the church. They fall away a short time later and they don't look back. But the church, the people are still bugging her. That is unfortunate. That should not happen. See, and then you have these ridiculous apologetics. I get a lot of mail I don't want from a lot of sources. I understand that. We all get mail that we don't want. That's, just a part of being an American. But you shouldn't be getting mail from the Mormon church if you don't want mail from the Mormon church. That shouldn't be a thing. Okay. Is there a number on the front cover to call to cancel? There might be. I don't know the answer to that. Other people, oh my gosh, my mother made it a point to get me a subscription to the Ensign when I left. That's very common. Of course, the Ensign was the church's official magazine. It's been renamed now to the Liahona. Eventually, and those would go right into the garbage. Eventually, they stopped coming when it became clear it was money down the drain. That's the amusing thing now, is that these church magazines now are free. So you can literally sign anyone up. My understanding is you can sign anyone up for a church subscription to a magazine. You don't have to pay any money, and you don't have to tell them that you are the one who are sending them these propaganda materials. And it has led to a proliferation of these people getting materials that they do not actually want. Whoops.
I just came in.
Sorry, a couple of other comments here. What?
I just came in from getting the mail.
Sorry, I guess I'm scrolling on. Thank you so much for leaving the church voluntarily so we don't have to throw you out. The last 3 years has been great without you. No one misses you. Your video shows that you still have unfinished business with the Mormons. Your out-of-control emotions are in full view. Glad you pulled your name off the rolls. That's a typical response here. And so I do have a quick response that I want to give to that individual. First of all, my name in particular is still on the rolls. Not that really means anything, I guess. But just to clarify, this post is from someone else. I wouldn't expect you to understand any of this because Mormonism is really good at stripping away critical thinking. He has no idea that this isn't my post and that I'm reposting someone else. I mean, he's not thinking deeply about this. It's almost impressive how malleable your mind becomes under Mormonism. It's never too late to, release yourself from all of this religious nonsense. Join us in reality where logic, reason, and actual human decency are a thing. It's no wonder, folks, that the Mormon church is shriveling when you have comments like this, which are very, very common. Another one, when is the last time you read the Book of Mormon? I suggest you read again and ponder. What do you mean? Like reading it the 28th time is going to make some kind of a difference? I've read the Book of Mormon dozens of times. Reading it again is a complete waste of time as far as trying to receive further light and knowledge from the Father. And this is my response to that as well here. Hey, Garrick, welcome to the program. Could just roll it up and swat a TBM. If they demand an answer, tell them you're smiting the word of God. Yes, I do understand that. So first of all, the idea you're supposed to read the Book of Mormon and ponder it. Well, let me tell you this. Pondering is not a reliable pathway to truth when it's based on outdated, unsupported narratives. The Book of Mormon is filled with anachronisms and lacks any credible archaeological foundation. Reading it again is not going to solve any of that. People who have loved the church people who have left the church shouldn't be receiving church materials. If they don't want them, the church should respect the wishes of ex-Mormons, ex-members, and leave them alone. It's also about respecting people's boundaries, especially after they moved off from the faith. Hey, Darren, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us. And this is what Molly said, because the 27th time or whatever after reading it your whole life, the one extra time is going to make you change your mind and see the truth. That is a hilarious comment. That's what I was saying. You're supposed to read it. And this is what I responded. It's the illusory truth effect. The more you repeat something, the more that it feels true, no matter how ridiculous it is. That's why if you say Joseph Smith was a monogamous enough times, some poor soul might believe it. That's absolutely true. It's a ridiculous epistemology at its finest. Truth is whatever you've heard the most amount of times? No. Why bother with evidence when you can just chant your way to certainty? No, sir. And this is other people, a family or a friend probably signed your address up. And that's unfortunately commonly the case. That, in my opinion, should not be done. And someone said that a friend is trying to help you come to your senses. And I said, no, sir. One does not use critical thinking to come to the conclusion that Mormonism is true. That's a faith-based journey. Okay, when you believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you're doing that despite your senses, despite critical thinking. Faith is an unreliable pathway to truth. Those of us who actually value evidence and reason won't find any shred of truthfulness in the church's truth claims. It's just smoke and mirrors with a dash of wishful thinking. And let's be real. For anyone who has left the church, they should not be getting church materials shoved in their faces if they're explicitly taught. If they explicitly said that they don't want them, it's an outright disrespect to their agency and a perfect example of the manipulative control this organization shows. Thanks a lot, Darren. Appreciate you coming onto the program. So that's basically it. Yeah, can you unsubscribe? Probably you can. The whole point is, why is she getting it to begin with? Somebody out there views her as a lost soul and has signed her up from church propaganda materials. That's wrong. That shouldn't be done. And also, I'll just say one other thing about this. It's especially like the Friend magazine or these others ones that are geared for kids. Behind Mormon theology is the idea that disgusting patriarchal polygamy is okay. That includes the grooming of children for polygamy. Excuses for that. No child should be exposed to that kind of thing. The Mormon church magazines also make disgusting excuses about why it was okay to be racist before 1978. No, kids shouldn't be reading that. Neither should anyone else. Let's not forget that the church doubles down on the sexism and on its homophobia and transphobia. These are all baked into the church's magazines, whether implicitly or explicitly. Okay, you're going to encounter these type of things in the Friend magazine. You really will. The church just a couple of months ago released some cartoons that were designed for kids, trying to rationalize how it was okay that Joseph Smith married teenage girls in cartoon format. No kid should be exposed to that as some kind of a divine truth. The Friend magazine and all of the church magazines are immoral at their core, and sending it to other people is morally indefensible. And for those of you out there, can you please consider joining our YouTube channel membership, becoming a groupie? Your support helps us create more content. Follow this link to join. I think we beat that one down. Let's continue the shorts.
Could it be that someone out there believes they have a special deep connection with an invisible immortal being, but really they don't? In other words, is it possible that people think they have a deeply personal relationship with a god, but it's all just in their head? If we're being honest, the obvious answer here is yes. All of this reminds me of those creepy guys who stalk celebrities like Taylor Swift. They go to every concert, follow her every move, and tell all their friends they have this close, mutually beneficial relationship with her. But of course, it's all happening in their heads. There is no relationship. And here's the kicker. How can you possibly demonstrate that your supposed relationship with your pet god exists in reality when you've got zero substance?
Yeah, I did create this also with AI as well. I guess I spend too much time on AI. I like to mess around with it. But these thoughts are all my own. Is it possible that you think that you have an actual relationship with someone who's invisible, anthropomorphic, and immutable, but it's actually all in your head? Is that possible? That's an important question for people to wrestle with. And I take huge issue with the idea of Jesus taking the wheel. That's why I put that in there. In fact, mocking Jesus taking the wheel has gotten me into a little bit of trouble in times past. If you let Jesus take the wheel, folks, you're going to crash your car. That's a demonstrable reality. Okay, you shouldn't be letting Jesus take the wheel. You should take control of your own life. Take your autonomy back. Okay, is it possible that your supposed personal relationship is all in your head? That's an important concept to consider, especially when the fact that you cannot possibly, if you're being honest with yourself, the answer is all much like the people who think, look at this stalker here who was arrested for stalking Taylor Swift. He swears he has a mutual relationship with Miss Swift. I guess you shouldn't call her Miss Swift or Taylor Swift, but it's all in his head. It's not in actual reality. And my point is, what is the difference between this disgusting stalker who has literally, I guess, broken into her house in New York or whatever. What's the difference between this guy who says that he has a relationship with Taylor Swift that he cannot demonstrate, that he has no evidence for, that is literally only in his mind? What's the difference between him saying that he has a relationship with Taylor Swift and your theist friend who says that they have a relationship with God? Do you know what the difference is? I don't see any difference whatsoever. When you have a relationship with someone, it's something that you can demonstrate. Okay. He can't demonstrate a relationship with Taylor Swift, just like all of these theists can't demonstrate any relationships with their imaginary best friend either. That's the entire point of your head. Do you really have a personal relationship with a God, or is it all in your head? Now, you tell your friends that you've got this mutually beneficial relationship. God is taking care of me. Jesus is watching out for me. Well, where's the reality of that? What it seems a lot more like a pretend. Okay, it's either a self-delusion, it could be a hallucination, or it's something that no one should take seriously, devoid of evidence. Many people claim to have relationships with supernatural deities, ghouls, ghosts, genies, spirits, whatever it is. How am I supposed to take any of these supposed relationships seriously when you have zero evidence for the proposition? That's the point. Okay, thanks so much for dropping by. I really appreciate that, everyone out there. Thanks so much. We do have a Patreon page out there, which I don't always mention, but if you like this program, you can certainly support it. I would appreciate that. Yeah, we're on to personal relationships here. Let's continue on. And as Deborah Harding said, there's no difference. It is truly all in your head. It took me years to understand that. See, that's the, how can you demonstrate that it is not in your head? That's what I'm looking for. If you had a real relationship with a God of some sort, there should be some way to verify that. It should be objectively verifiable through independent corroboration. If you don't have that, then there's no difference between that and you thinking that you have a relationship with a God. And if it is possible that you can only think that you have a relationship with God and you can't demonstrate it, then it's something that either you yourself should not take seriously, and certainly do not ever expect me to take that kind of a proposition seriously. As Garrick said, correct, a problem with absolute morality thinking. There is no absolute morality unless threatened with life or death. Morality is just morality. It's lived or it isn't. Okay, now, this next one actually kind of went viral over here because I posted this from Uncorrelated Mormonism, which is a very interesting channel if you haven't had a chance to check it out. I forget the fellow's name who runs Uncorrelated Mormonism over there on YouTube. You know what? I'm sorry to, I'm going to look this up for a second here. See if it'll say Uncorrelated Mormonism, a fascinating channel here. He's been, I believe he's been excommunicated from the church. I forget his name here. I want to say it's Rob. Sorry, I reposted his admin. I can't remember what his name is, but sorry. Anyway, I reposted this because he talked about how he was kept out of a Latter-day Saint wedding for his own daughter. His daughter Anna was getting married. I believe it was in the Seattle, Washington temple. And even though he is a temple-worthy individual who's paid millions of dollars in tithing, both he and his wife were kept out of the temple. And it's really kind of gone viral, not necessarily on YouTube, but on Instagram, it's really picked up steam. Let's watch that. I'll give you a reaction to that.
Anna, my oldest daughter, was sealed in the Spokane, Washington temple, and my wife and I were both told that we couldn't enter. We both are members, both have served in responsible callings, both are temple worthy, and have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in tithing.
I feel you very deeply. I have definitely paid over 6 figures in tithing myself.
However, because we refused to essentially pledge allegiance to the current leadership, and we were denied the opportunity to see Anna sealed.
Right. It requires a personal fealty, F-E-A-L-T oath. You have to swear, you have to affirm, you have to kiss the ring of Russell Marion Nelson Sr. personally, or you can't enter his esoteric Masonic castle.
Of course, both my wife and I could have bowed the knee and kissed the ring, so to speak. However, should this honestly be required to witness a ceremony that has no need to be secret in the first place? There is nothing in the ceremony that needs to be secret. The entire concept itself seems to be a carryover from the days when polygamous marriages had to be secret. Today, the entire thing could be performed in a stake center, and no one would think twice. Well, my wife and I...
Yeah, Big Chris, welcome to the program. That is true. You can just lie. But I can tell you from years of being a PIMO, I was a PIMO, physically in, mentally out, for 12 years. During that time, I was definitely not being as honest as I possibly could about my temple recommend and about my ecclesiastical endorsement, since I worked for BYU during that period of time. And it becomes really hard to try to justify that in your mind. Sometimes you just want to be able to see your child's wedding without having to tell a lie. So I definitely see where he's coming from there.
I were waiting in the waiting room, I noticed a picture of Jesus, which is nice. However, for some reason, there was also a very large and prominent picture of President Nelson and his counselors. Does a temple of God really need a picture of the current leaders in it?
That's a very good question. Why are there pictures of the current First Presidency in all of the temples? What's the point of that? The point is to remind you that without their personal permission, you can't come inside.
This is weird, to say the least. Is President Nelson worried that we might forget that we need his permission to enter the temple in the first place?
Right.
Some may think this is exaggerated. However, to gain access to the temples for any reason, then you need to accept the top leaders as God's authorized servants.
Right. And the only authorized servants. You can't just say, yes, they are God's servants. You have to say that they're the only authorized servants who have the keys, and et cetera, et cetera. As Deborah said, you have to pay, play, and perform to the church's liking, or you were out of the game. That is correct. It is a pay-to-play situation, and you have to, it's a high level of thought control as well. It's not enough to just pay tithing. It's not enough to be temple worthy. Your thoughts have to conform to the thoughts as interpreted or as brought to you by the current Mormon hierarchy.
And the president of the church as the only authorized servant
Right.
that has all authority. You also have to accept the local leaders as God's servants as well. This is such a silly question when you really think about it. Did Christ ask questions like this when he healed people? Did Christ ask questions like this when he taught the multitude? Christ never did anything like this. All he said was, "Come and follow me." I personally have no ill feelings towards the local leaders, as I know that they are typically good men who are blinded by the philosophies of men. I truly understand, because at one time I was there personally. It really shouldn't be like this at all. Christ's doctrine was fundamentally simple. Marriages should be publicly accessible like they originally were in the church. We shouldn't need the leader's stamp of approval to access God. We shouldn't endlessly praise the leaders. We shouldn't need their pictures in the temple. We shouldn't care more for the words of leaders than the words of Christ. The whole thing is messed up, and we need a reset back to the simple doctrines of Christ.
And this is a very compelling take, and it's very earnest, and it's very, very interesting. He brings up the point, first of all, that he said that these rituals, there's no reason that they need to be secret. He's 100% correct, because back in the early times of the church, they were doing baptisms of the dead in rivers. They were doing these ceremonies in the top of the red brick store. Marriages that they were, William Clayton would marry Joseph Smith just out, not even in the top of the red brick store, just somewhere, just in a regular house. Why is it that that was okay then, but it is not okay now? And as he's pointed out, this is just a sick carryover from the secrecy required for polygamy in the, say late 1800s. There's no reason that it can't, the church can't perform any of these ceremonies in a stake center today, and they wouldn't bat an eye. And why is it that they insist upon keeping these things secret, and you have to, bow the knee? It's because they want to have total control over you. It's about control. It's not really about doctrine.
I really love Mormonism. However, there is no way that Mormonism today is good in God's eyes. It is far more like a whited sepulcher. Mormonism today is outwardly filled with beautiful images, but inwardly filled with dead works and vain ambitions. Yes.
Yeah, that is such a powerful take here. He does have a very good channel on Mormonism. I've watched quite a few of his videos. He retains some level of belief in Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, and you can tell that he's a very sincere and honest person. And a couple of these comments here. I'm sorry somebody hurt you. Remember, the gospel is perfect and the people are not. I did respond to this comment. The gospel is perfect. First of all, there's no reason to care about some failed apocalyptic preacher from Palestine. Jesus is dead. It's been 2,000 years. He's not coming back. There's nothing perfect about his message except for the fact that he's perfectly dead. And Big Chris, that's why it's important to have living Thanks, Big Chris. I appreciate that. And the church has become what they preach against. Sure. And as Garrick has said, control plus leverage on abdicated emotions. You're 100%. You're 100% right about that. Somebody responded back. It's the message, brother, that never gets old and never dies. If your take with anything other than that, I invite you to please reread the New Testament. You always get these people who said, "Well, just read my holy book. Just read it again." Well, I mean, I've read the New Testament, dude. It's nothing but a cobbled together mess of speculative, anonymous gibberish. Copies of copies with zero originals and endless contradictions, like the resurrection. Free your mind from religious nonsense. And they always want to close out with, well, I hope you can find peace. This is the theist way of their sanctimonious judgment on you. I hope you can find peace. Listen, first of all, who says I haven't found peace? I found it without needing to worship your make-believe deity. You're acting like a religious softy, projecting your insecurities by insisting that true peace only comes from your fantasy God. That's what they always want to say. Well, without my God, without my system of belief, you can't find real joy. Sorry, that's a fantasy. I don't need your spiritual hand-holding. If you wanted to prove a point, maybe you'd provide some cold, hard evidence for your so-called imaginary best friends. I'm talking about objective, verifiable proof, not fables or personal delusions. But we both know that you don't have any. Our conversation is nothing but a spectacular waste of time. Seriously, what does it say about your God that he can't or won't manifest in any way that's actually detectable? I keep going back to that point. For me, the problem of God's divine hiddenness is one of the biggest problems with a belief in God in general. And number two, it's the entire epistemology that apparently this all-wise, all-knowing, all-loving deity has given to us. It's not based on nothing but faith and feelings, both of which are highly subjective and are not reliable pathways to truth. The so-called evidence that we find in hearsay holy books is spectacularly unconvincing. So I do appreciate this particular take here. And what I found when it comes to talking with Latter-day Saints or anyone else about religion is if you phrase your critiques as a way that Jesus would do things, that gets a lot more inroads than just saying there's no reason to take Jesus seriously to begin with. That's why his approach here with uncorrelated Mormonism, I think, might be more effective than my own. But I can only approach things from the way that I approach things. There's not much I can do about that. I have a couple more shorts. We're going to keep this to an hour-long episode here, but I got lots more shorts here. Many more shorts. Let's see what we got here. If you want to join this program, you can follow the link that is scrolling along the bottom, StreamYard.com with a /. We can talk anything Mormon related. Now, next up here, I think we'll just watch maybe 4 more shorts called Good. Why fakers stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Believe me, I know this. I know this very, very well, having been a faker myself for having been a faker myself for a long time. Why do fakers stay in the church? Navigating leadership callings after losing faith in Mormonism. Let's get my take on that.
Faith in Mormonism, and trust me, there's a lot of them. Many still try to keep up appearances by attending church and holding down calling. But here's the thing. Many of these folks don't feel comfortable in major leadership roles or positions where they have to teach about the supposed truths of the gospel.
Yes, the supposed truths of the gospel are, as I like to sometimes phrase it, the glad tidings of the polygamous gospel of Joseph Smith. These people, when you lose faith, you don't want to generally take those high leadership positions. And there's a reason, is because you have to toe the party line and you're subject to more scrutiny in those positions. So you're going to gravitate towards places where you don't need to pretend to teach laughable nonsense for no good reason.
So they end up gravitating to callings in the young men's or young women's programs, where it's mostly about team activities, campouts, or social events. No need to dive into doctrine. And still others find their way into nursery or primary callings, where they can adapt lessons into more secular humanist philosophies, rather than trying to teach the nonsense inspired by Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. So next time you're wondering where all the fakers are in your congregation, now you know where to look. They're the ones leading the campouts are teaching little kids in ways that don't sound like, well, Mormonism.
Right. And I had some people in the comments here try to say that I'm deceiving people, that I'm not telling the truth about being a faker in Mormonism. They said, you don't get to choose your own calling. Bishops, folks, are really, really smart out there. They probably know who the fakers are better than you imagine. And they're not going to try to call a faker or a PMO, somebody who doesn't drink the Mormon Kool-Aid, into a gospel doctrine position or into a high leadership position, because he requires those people to toe the orthodox line. And as Deborah here said, the main reason I stopped being in the primary president, the lies I would have to teach. like singing the song Follow the Prophet. Look, my last callings in the church, Deborah, I feel you very deeply here. My last callings in the church were in primary. That was like the last vestige where I could try to be a part of the church, but not teach anything that was harmful. But I was definitely conflicted with some of the primary songs because they are a form of brainwashing. They are a form of indoctrination into harmful concepts, such as following the greedy businessmen and bloodsucking lawyers who lead the Mormon empire without questioning. When the prophet speaks, the thinking has been done. When the prophet speaks, the debate is over. Those type of mentalities are still prevalent even in primary, even in nursery. But that is the least harmful place for a PMO to reside. So I'm not surprised at all that you ended up there. And I ended up there myself as well. And so did Rebecca Biblioteca and some other, ex-Mormons as well. I was going to say something else. That's the spirit of discernment. Well, Big Chris, I actually believe in that particular aspect of bishops' discernments. They know who the fakers are probably better than you might actually imagine. Hey, Scab, welcome to the program. Thanks for dropping by. Appreciate you. And as Garrick said, your leaders created some catchphrases to be used both as a wall and to signal themselves as a useful idiot. Their odd mockery on intelligence. And Deborah, in nursery, marching around, banging plates together, singing that song, Follow the Prophet, it was so cringe. Yes, indeed it is. In fact, if you read the CES letter, I believe it is chapter 18, but it's the section on prophets, Jeremy Reynolds takes issue with that particular hymn, which repeats mindlessly over and over again. I believe it is 20 or 30 times the idea that you're supposed to follow the prophet. And there's no good reason to do so. That was a critique that he put out. And I actually released a video a couple of weeks ago that talked about that, where I took the CES letter, that particular chapter on prophets, and I voiced it and used visuals to it. I was trying to think about doing that for the entire CES letter, but that would be a major project that might take me up to 20 hours of work or maybe even more. And so, Howie, so true. I was camped in primary for over a decade. Yeah, I feel you very deeply. That's like the last place that you go. And it's funny, when I was on Instagram and also on TikTok, people would say, oh, you're lying. You don't get to choose your calling. Well, it's more of a negotiation, I think, than a lot of people would think. When you're a true believing Latter-day Saint, a lot of times you will just accept callings without reservation. But when your faith is wavering, the bishop knows it, and he's not going to try to put you into a position, usually, that makes you feel uncomfortable. Most bishops are trying to do the right thing as far as trying to work with people. I've had many, many good bishops in the church, and in all of my time in the church, I really think I've only had one bad bishop, really, truly bad. So I think that's saying a lot here. So yeah, you want to find the fakers, go check out your primary and especially check out the nursery. And that's also a reason that I spent a lot of time, real quick before we go on, in the scouting program as well. I was a 2-time scoutmaster, and those are some of my favorite memories in the church. Of course, the church got rid of its scouting program, I think in 2018/2019. And for me, that was a real step back. I don't think that the program that's replaced scouting is as good as the scouting program itself. But then I get to, on Wednesday nights, instead of teaching in the young men's where you have to teach some of these ridiculous nonsense that's associated with Mormonism and try to pass off the fables in the scriptures as divine truths, you could just, go out in nature. You could talk about building a fire. You could talk about being kind to others. These scouting principles are really, really great. And it's so sad to me that the Mormon Church refused to institute the background checks in its scouting program, and it held hostage the regular scouting program as well, and made it so that the entire scouts, the BSA from top to bottom, did not do its due diligence in safeguarding its scouts. And there was been tens of thousands of abuses because the Mormon Church refused to engage in those basic safeguarding procedures. It's sad to me that one of the best parts about Mormonism is something that the church absolutely spoiled. And it just goes to the fact that religion poisons everything. No one in their right mind, without citing a religious justification, would ever say that we should send kids into scouting programs in which background leaders are not background checked. But the Mormon Church did exactly that. Scab, as a scout yourself, I do appreciate that. I was a Cub Scout. That's back when the church did the Cub Scouting. Now they generally do not do any scouting at all. But even after I was a Cub Scout, they didn't do they got rid of the Cub Scouting program and just kept the Boy Scouting program. So I was a Cub Scout, I was a Boy Scout, I was a 2-time scout leader, and all 3 of my sons are Eagle Scouts. So yeah, I've got a great background with the scouting program. It's probably one of the best programs in the church, even though the church messed it all up. I like how they ask the husband's permission before they call the wife to the calling. Big Chris is always very, very sarcastic. I do actually have an episode coming out about that as well, believe it or not, where David Bednar and Susan Bednar, when he was called into the apostleship, the way that Susan was treated in that particular exchange is a perfect example of the cult-like doctrine over self that the church espouses. But yeah, asking a husband for a calling about the wife, that's peak cringe. Hashtag, yeah, Big Chris is all about the sarcasm. I appreciate that. While you're at it, before we get to these last 3 shorts here, if you can please follow us on social media, I would appreciate that. We are on TikTok, we are on X, we are on Instagram, and we are on Facebook. And traditional culture trumps modernism. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, I got 3 last shorts here to take us out of here. Now, before I get to this one here, real quick, I'll cover a couple of these last comments. Deborah, I told the bishop, if he ever asked my husband first for a calling, I wouldn't take it. Yeah, there's no reason to ask a husband first for a calling. That's absolutely absurd. And they don't do the reverse. It's just another example of Mormon sexism. And as Garrick said, per Scout's background check that gets into my grandfather, never had that. Why should we? I understand that. Okay, now I do regret a little bit this next short that I made here about a former missionary companion. And I wonder if I was too hard on him, but I have a lot of bad feelings about him, which are obviously still percolating around. So let's watch it. You tell me if I was too hard on Elder Clark here. Maybe I was. We'll find out.
How about a quick Mormon missionary story? One of my companions in Washington, D.C. in the 1990s, named Elder Clark, was a lazy piece of work. He stubbornly refused to knock on any doors, yet somehow he was made senior companion and was even promoted to zone leader, despite his abysmal work ethic. Instead of doing actual missionary work, Clark insisted we spend day after day at different members' homes, supposedly helping them share the gospel with their neighbors. In reality, it was just a cover to hang out and play board games or waste time. As the junior companion, there wasn't much I could do, especially since he was technically in charge as a high-ranking missionary. To make matters worse, Elder Clark made excuses to drive around the zone visiting other elders when it wasn't even necessary, all under the guise of his supervisory responsibilities. Thankfully, I was finally transferred out of there, but not before I realized how futile the missionary effort felt when I actually wanted to work, and Clark just liked hanging out with LDS teenage girls. Elder Clark was a piece of trash.
Okay, now I kind of regret that last line that I said, but I only regret it just a little bit. So what I didn't get a chance to put into the short was the fact that Clark was also verbally abusive to me. He was also a really, really big guy, and he would use his physical size to be imposing. And he also read my journals without asking me. My private personal journals, he cracked open and decided to read through those without my permission. And he was just an overhaul jerk. Okay. So what's interesting though is that, looking back on it, Elder Clark really saved people from really encountering Mormonism. So I'm very conflicted, because if every missionary was like Elder Clark, I think that the missionary program would actually be a lot better, because instead of trying to pound religious doctrine into people's heads, you would just go to the members and ask them to share the gospel with their friends. But at the time, I really resented it because I wanted to be a good working missionary. And the problem was that he would go weeks on end without knocking on any doors. I'm talking about a couple of weeks where he refused to knock on any doors from anyone. So during the daytime, we would just spend time driving around the zone, visiting missionaries, which was totally unnecessary. He could have just picked up the phone and called them on the phone, but he would drive hours on end during the daytime. And then at the nighttime, when the members were back home, he would just rotate from member's house to member's house, playing board games and goofing off and wasting a bunch of time. And he liked to go to the members' homes that had hot teenage girls, okay, which this entire thing was a real affront to me as a missionary, but there was not anything that I could really do about it. I was the junior companion and he was the zone leader. So it still bothers me a lot that he wasted so much of my time. But on the other hand, look, now that I don't drink any of the Mormon Kool-Aid, I'm glad that we wasted all that time, because the entire philosophy, or the entire endeavor of Mormon missions trying to teach people laughable nonsense for no good reason, that is a larger waste of time. So I still don't know what to say about this. The thing about this is that Elder Clark now has passed on. He is dead. So I don't know if I was too hard on him on this short. I'm very interested to see what you have to say. Yeah, maybe it was too much. Let's read a couple of the comments that go along with this. Someone said, I have a companion just like that. He became assistant to the president. Yeah. He was the most arrogant, lazy sod, but for some reason, the sun shone out of his arse. I feel, yeah. Found out recently he's a stake president. Wouldn't be surprised at all. That's a very common sentiment. I feel, that's why I said, I feel ya. Sorry. A couple of other comments. What did Jesus say to the apostles that wanted to be ranked first? Well, he said that that is first shall be last, and he that is last shall be first. I was going to go back in and say that, and take out that part where I said that he was a piece of trash, but that's really how I felt about him, and I kind of still do. So, I mean, we finally got transferred out of there after a couple of months of having to deal with him, of literally, he would just make all the calls. He would tell us what we were going to do. It wasn't a collaborative effort because he knew that if he asked me what I was going to do, I would say, let's go do real missionary work. He refused to do any real missionary work for months. Okay, so let's just be honest about it. Look, I was a great missionary. I'm not going to make two bones about that. I was not an average missionary. I was not a good missionary. I was a great, great missionary. Okay. I worked hard the entire 2 years. The amount of times that I slacked off, you can count them on one hand. Just a few hours of wasted time on my mission. That was something that I could control. Now, when I was a junior companion to a lot of these senior elders who like to waste lots and lots of time, there was not much I can do about that. So I'm not going to count that. And even when I was a junior companion, like I was with Elder Clark, they still put me with senior companions who were complete slackers. My mission president, time and time again, gave me people who were not interested in doing missionary work and who were only there because of the shame and manipulation and the stigma that comes from not serving a mission. So I still resent that a little bit, which is odd because, I mean, what's the difference? I don't know. I'm really torn about that. Howie, being a senior companion doesn't change the power dynamic in that situation much either. Trust me. And it doesn't. And it really doesn't. It definitely doesn't. Hey, Smith, welcome to the program. Daughter had a companion that wouldn't get out of bed. Oh, yeah, I had those as well. Wouldn't exercise, threw temper tantrums by kicking and screaming on the floor. I had all of that. Mission president would not intervene and said, is helping my daughter mature. I had all of that happen to me. And this is, and learn how to deal with life's hard situations, right? That's exactly what I was told from other people, that this was supposed to be some kind of a mission experience here. The mission was my breaking point, lost my family over that. I am certainly very sorry to hear about that. And I do wish you the very best. I have 3 last shorts to take us out. We're going to keep this to a 1-hour broadcast here. Next one is when I do have a couple of missionary stories in here. And this one also, my Mormon mission story, sleeping on the floor in an infested apartment. Let's see what's going on here.
Mormon missionary story. When I was a missionary in Washington, D.C. in the 1990s, there was a brief period where the total mission had an odd number of missionaries. Since missionary companionships are always 2 by 2, I ended up being the odd man out and was transferred into an already established companionship, meaning we had 3 missionaries in one apartment. But here's the problem. Missionary apartments are designed for 2 people. We didn't even have a couch. So guess who got the floor? That's right, me. For weeks, I slept on a hardwood floor with nothing but a blanket. And to top it off, the apartment was infested with bugs. I got bitten every night. No surprise there. And one spider bite left a scar on my right thumb that's still with me today. But hey, what a way for a multi-billion-dollar mega corporation to treat its door-to-door underwear salesman, right? Just another inspired reminder about how much care the LDS Church shows for its missionaries.
I do like this short quite a bit. I like this short. So let's, why does a $300 billion mega corporation provide substandard housing for some of its missionaries? That is highly incongruous. And I got a couple of people who are, kind of giving me a reality check. They said, come on, man, it builds character. God, this is a trial for our own benefit. It may indeed build character, but it is incongruous to me to see that a multi-billion-dollar mega corporation treats its missionaries in this way. There's no reason that I needed to sleep on the floor. There's no reason that I needed to have a pest-infested apartment, and there's no reason that I needed to be bit by spiders. The fact that no one suggested a rotation tells me something about the character built by the LDS Church. And here's the thing. I was the odd man out in the mission field. And I kept being told that this was only going to be the odd man out for a couple of days when all the missionaries need to be 2 by 2, but somebody went home or had a sick emergency, and I ended up being the odd guy. And I think it was because, actually, I do remember now, is because my missionary companion had a seizure, and that's a subject for another conversation, and he was finally sent home. He had a major seizure. So I was kept told that this was only going to be a couple of days. So that's why I was put into an apartment that only had 2 beds in it, and we did not even have a couch. And instead of asking them, since their belongings were already all set up in their particular areas, I just said, you know what, I'll just sleep on the floor. And all I had was a blanket. Now, I mean, why is it that the senior Mormon apostles, they never face these type of particular hazards in their callings? Okay, they are well compensated for their duties. They never sleep on the floor. They're never bitten by spiders. They have beautiful homes, and some of them have second homes in Park City or sometimes in Heber. They also have, they're flanked by church security. and they're compensated with millions of dollars in the long run for their efforts. There's a level of hypocrisy when the senior church leaders don't have the same type of struggles that the missionaries have. That's called hypocrisy. And let's not forget the simple fact of the matter is that the current first presidency, not one of those three individuals actually served a mission. Now they're going to command other people in the name of Almighty God to do so. Again, this is a hypocritical take. All missionaries should have beds to sleep on. I don't know why this is a controversial take, but when I look at some of my comments on Instagram, they said, well, you should have just bucked it up. Well, I certainly did buck it up. And here's the thing. I could have asked for a rotation for those other missionaries. I could have said, hey, everybody, let's take turns on, we only have to sleep 1 out of 3 on the floor, but I didn't do that. And that's because I was selfless about my missionary service. That's a fundamental fact. And Big Chris, but did you die? No, sir, I did not die. I am still here, much to your chagrin. Now my last short here, I'm going to keep this to an hour-long broadcast here, is the legend of Elder Hamilton and the spirit of missionary work. If you could leave me a 5-star review, if you could hit the thumbs up, if you could turn on notifications, if you could subscribe, I'd be very grateful for that. Let's hear about Elder Hamilton because he was a legend in the mission field. And I just wanted to give you a quick story about him.
Missionary storytelling time. When I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Washington, D.C. in the 1990s, I got assigned to Elder Hamilton. This guy was a legend. He knew how to do missionary work like nobody else. He changed how I approached my entire mission. Hamilton never walked by anyone without trying to teach them the gospel. He was completely fearless, whether it was on preparation day, in a parking lot, or just anywhere. He had a deep and abiding testimony of the glad tidings of Joseph Smith and wanted to share it with anyone and everyone. Hamilton was one of the few companions I had who actually followed the rules, worked hard, and was genuinely a nice guy. Too bad I only had a couple of weeks with him. He truly embodied the Great Commission recorded at the end of the gospel, even if it was only for a brief moment in the world of LDS door-to-door Masonic underwear salesmanship for a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire.
Now, this is all coming back to me, by the way. I'm realizing that this particular short, the time that I was bitten by bugs was when I was the odd man out. And that was also at the same time that I was serving with Elder Hamilton. So we had 3 people in that particular companionship. Elder Hamilton was spectacularly good at convincing people to believe in absolute nonsense for no good reason. He never let anyone, and I mean never let any human being who he encountered not receive a message, whether it was in the grocery store, whether it was getting gas, wherever it was, he was a legend. And this is the thing. I only served with Elder Hamilton and whoever the other companion was, I forget his name, for about that 3-week period of time, which is the same period of time that I was being bitten by bugs because I was the odd man out. This was the best missionary companion that I ever served with. And I only had one other missionary companion, in my opinion, who was above center of mass or who was a great missionary who went on to become an assistant to the president. And there's a reason that I was never paired with someone like Elder Hamilton. That's because I was a great missionary who followed the rules and was obedient all the time. So I never got the chance to work with another elder, except for maybe my trainer, who was also similarly committed to the cause. So I wonder what my mission would have been like. Would I have had a different experience if I had been a slacker and could have had a chance to work with some great elders? That's a subject to a conversation that I will definitely never know. Okay, Real Talk Mormonism. Thanks, folks. Thanks so much for dropping by. If you could please consider joining our channel membership or our Patreon, I would appreciate that. Your support helps us create more great content. Follow that link on the bottom of the screen. Thanks so much for joining me on another episode of Real Talk Mormonism. Always think celestial and remember, no unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.